It started with an offer. $5 million. One night. No strings. Most men would have said yes. But not him. He looked her in the eye, this billionaire CEO, this woman who thought she could buy anyone, and said 5 words she never forgot. "You can't afford me, Alice." And just like that, everything she built began to fall apart. She had everything except peace. Alice Reddington was the type of woman headlines were written about. CEO of a $4.2 billion beauty empire, featured on Forbes, keynote speaker at Ivy League universities, and a legend in every high-end boardroom in Manhattan. By 38, she had outgrown luxury. Yachts bored her. Awards meant nothing. And the men who once impressed her were now disposable, like handbags that had gone out of style. But none of that mattered tonight. Because tonight, she was running. 3 days earlier, a tabloid exposed her fiancé, a U.S. senator, cheating on her with a model half her age. It wasn't the betrayal that shattered her. It was the smug smile he wore when she confronted him. So she left. No PR statement. No press release. Just disappeared. She booked herself into a remote luxury wellness retreat in the mountains of Colorado. No reception. No cameras. Just solitude, yoga, and overpriced silence. And that's where she met him. Lucas wasn't like the others. He didn't flinch when he looked into her eyes. He didn't rush to impress. He didn't even smile unless he meant it. He was one of the massage therapists on staff. New, quiet, early 30s, tall with a calm presence that made the air feel different when he entered a room. He had the hands of someone who had worked hard all his life, and the posture of someone who had stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. On the first day, Alice barely looked at him. By the second, she requested him specifically. By the third, she started asking questions. "Where are you from?" "Wyoming," he answered simply. "What did you do before this?" "Construction, then nursing school, then this." She could tell he didn't want to share more, and that intrigued her. People usually tripped over themselves to impress her. But Lucas was a locked door. That night, something in her snapped. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in years, she wasn't the most powerful person in the room and she couldn't stand it. She waited for him at the spa after hours. He found her sitting on the edge of the massage table, wearing a silk robe and a look that said, "I get what I want." "Lucas," she said calmly, swirling her wine, "how much would it cost for one night?" He blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I'm not asking for love. Just one night. No cameras. No complications." She stood up, walked toward him. $5 million. Cash. One night with me. That's more than you'll make here in a lifetime. The room fell silent. Lucas didn't move. His eyes didn't widen. He didn't laugh. He didn't ask for clarification. Instead, he stared at her as if looking straight through the surface. Then he said it. "You can't afford me, Miss Reddington." For a second, she thought he was joking. Then she saw it in his eyes. He wasn't trying to be clever. He meant every word. She stepped back. "You don't know who you're talking to." "I do," he said. "And I also know who I am. I don't sell myself. Not for 5 million. Not for 500 million. She laughed, bitter and sharp. "Let me guess. You're some kind of moral preacher now?" He didn't flinch. "Number, I'm someone who's already lost too much to ever let money decide who I am." Alice's voice dropped. "What do you mean?" But he was already heading toward the door. "Ask your board," he said. "Ask them what happened 5 years ago in Phoenix." And just like that, he was gone. Alice stood frozen. still holding her glass. Her hand trembled. She hadn't heard the word Phoenix in years. Not since the scandal. Not since the cover-up. Not since the story that nearly destroyed her company before it ever hit the press. And now, a massage therapist, a nobody, had whispered it like a dagger. Who was he? That night, she didn't sleep. She searched every document she had access to. Employee files, financial records, legal settlements. There was no Lucas on the payroll, at least not officially. And when she finally found a photograph, her heart stopped. She knew that face. She had seen it before in a lawsuit, in a hospital report, in a funeral notice. Lucas wasn't just a masseur. He was the brother of the man her company had ruined. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. There he was, Lucas Callahan. She recognized him from a confidential lawsuit filed against Reddington Skincare 5 years earlier, a case involving toxic chemical exposure at one of their labs in Phoenix. A quiet scandal that never made the headlines, because they buried it before it could. His younger brother, Tyler Callahan, had been a junior chemist at the time. He died from severe lung damage after weeks of exposure to a faulty ventilation system, a system flagged in an internal report Alice had never read, or rather, had chosen not to. The family sued. The legal team settled quietly. Alice had never met them, never saw their faces, never read the full report. Until now, Lucas was never listed as a direct claimant. He hadn't taken the settlement money. Instead, it seemed, he vanished. She leaned back in her chair, hands shaking. Her empire, her cold, beautiful empire, had a crack in the foundation, and Lucas had found it. The next morning, she requested a private session at the spa. Lucas didn't show up. She tried again. Still nothing. On the third day, she marched into the staff lounge, ignoring the gasps and awkward silence. "Where is Lucas Callahan?" she demanded. The manager stammered. He checked out this morning. Didn't say where he was going." Alice froze. "Checked out? Just like that?" She wasn't used to being left behind. Without a word, she turned and walked out. Her driver was waiting. "Take me to Denver. I have a flight to catch." 3 days later, Alice stood outside a modest apartment complex in Fort Collins. No security, no doormen, just a rusted mailbox and a cracked sidewalk. How she found the address was a mix of corporate power, guilt, and obsession. She knocked. The door opened slowly. Lucas stood there, holding a cup of coffee, wearing a faded t-shirt and jeans. He looked exactly like before, calm, unshaken. "Alice?" he said, not surprised, not angry, just resigned. "I came to talk," she said, "not to fight." He stepped aside. Inside, the apartment was simple, clean. A few books, a guitar in the corner, no signs of wealth, no distractions. She sat down. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" "Would you have listened?" he asked. Silence. "I didn't come to the retreat to confront you," he continued. "I was trying to heal, trying to forget." "And I offered you money," she whispered, ashamed. He looked at her. "You offered me exactly what ruined my brother, a price on something that shouldn't have one." Alice closed her eyes. "I didn't know. About him. About you. You didn't want to know," Lucas said gently. "And that's worse." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I'm not here to apologize with a check," she said. "I came to understand." Lucas leaned forward. "Then ask the real question, Alice. Not who I am. Ask yourself who you've become." Later that night, she sat in her hotel room, staring at her own reflection. For the first time, She didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. The makeup, the diamonds, the curated posture, none of it mattered. Lucas had stripped her bare, not with anger, not with revenge, but with the truth. And the truth was, she wasn't proud of her empire. She was just afraid to lose it. But for the first time, she wanted something that couldn't be bought. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to earn it. The sound of rain tapped gently against the hotel window as Alice opened the file again. She had spent the past 2 days digging into every document, every email, every name tied to the Phoenix Lab scandal. Lucas was right. She hadn't wanted to know. At the time, her legal team had labeled it a minor safety issue. The payout was negligible compared to the company's profits that quarter. It wasn't even discussed in board meetings. But now, reading Tyler Callahan's medical records, the whistleblower reports, the photos of the facility, it felt like her empire had been built on a cemetery she never bothered to see. And Lucas, the older brother, the one who dropped out of school to raise him after their mom died, had lost everything. No wonder he looked at her like that. Meanwhile, Lucas stood at the edge of a cliffside trail, watching the river cut through the forest below. This was where he came when the guilt got too loud. He remembered the day Tyler got sick. At first, it was just a cough, then nosebleeds, then the ER. Lucas had begged him to quit the job. Tyler said no, we need the money. They always needed the money. And when Tyler collapsed in the lab hallway, there was no press conference, no apology, just silence and a check. Lucas never cashed it. He'd kept it sealed in an envelope, tucked inside an old guitar case, a reminder of what wasn't for sale. That evening, Alice sent him a message. Just one line. "Can I take you somewhere tomorrow?" He replied, "If it's not a boardroom, I'll consider." The next morning, they met outside a small rehab clinic on the east side of town. Alice had already made a donation anonymously to cover a year's worth of treatment for women recovering from chemical exposure in factories. Lucas stood beside her, arms crossed. "Why this place?" "My lab's suppliers cut corners," she said. "This clinic treats the women who paid for it with their health." He didn't respond. "I'm not trying to impress you," she added. "I'm trying to do something that actually matters." They walked inside together. The visit wasn't grand. No cameras, no press. Just quiet conversations, tears, and the look on a nurse's face when Alice asked what more they needed. Later, in the parking lot, Lucas said, "You could have just sent a check." Alice looked him in the eye. "I've done that my whole life. It's easier to throw money than show up. I'm done hiding behind zeros." He watched her for a long time. That night, they had dinner in a small diner off the highway. For the first time, they laughed, shared real stories, talked about dreams, not headlines. Lucas told her he once wanted to open a music school for underprivileged kids. Alice said she hadn't had a real friend in over a decade. Something shifted between them, not forgiveness, not yet, but something new. Soft, dangerous, real. Later, as he walked her to her car, Alice turned to him and asked, "Do you still think I'm the same woman who offered you money for a night?" He hesitated. "No," he said, "but I still don't know who you really are." She nodded. "Neither do I." The next morning, Lucas found a package at his door. Inside, a vinyl record vintage jazz and a handwritten note. "You said you liked real music. Thought you'd like this." Eh? He smiled. Just a little. It was the first time in years someone had remembered something simple about him. But the smile didn't last long. Later that afternoon, Lucas got a call from a blocked number. "Stay away from her," the voice said. "Calm, precise, dangerous." Before he could respond, the line went dead. Alice was in a meeting when her assistant burst in, pale and breathless. Your father's legal team just contacted the board. They're demanding a full audit of the Phoenix settlement. Her stomach dropped. He said he'd never touch that file. Well, he just did, and he's calling a shareholder meeting in 2 days. Of course he was. Victor Reddington hadn't been CEO in years, but he still controlled 41% of the voting stock, and he had never forgiven her for taking his company away. He was the kind of man who thought emotion was a liability and empathy a disease. Alice left the office immediately. That night, she drove to Lucas's apartment. He didn't answer the door, but it was unlocked. She found him sitting in the dark, record playing low in the background. His eyes were heavy. You okay? She asked. He didn't look at her. Your father called me. Alice froze. What did he say? That I'm a liability. That if I cared about my brother's legacy, I'd disappear again quietly. She sat beside him. He's trying to scare you. Lucas finally turned to her. The scary part is, it almost worked. There was a long silence between them. I shouldn't have come back, he said quietly. Alice shook her head. Number, I'm glad you did. I need you here, not for the company. For me. He looked at her again. There was pain in his eyes. And something else. You're not the person I hated for 5 years, he said. But I don't know how to stop feeling like I'm betraying my brother by. By what? She whispered. By caring about you. Her breath caught. Then maybe we both need to let go of who we were. She reached out, gently, and took his hand. For the first time, he didn't pull away. The next morning, news broke online. Reddington Skincare under fire. Former CEO Victor Reddington calls for investigation into Phoenix incident. Alice's phone exploded with messages. Journalists, lawyers, board members. But she ignored them all. She was already on the way to Lucas's. He opened the door before she knocked. Come in, he said. We need to talk. He handed her a file, one she hadn't seen before. I found this yesterday, Tyler's journal. I didn't want to read it, but I think you should. She sat down, opened it, and began to read. In shaky handwriting, Tyler had written, I still believe in people. Even when systems fail, I believe one person can change things if they have the courage. Tears blurred Alice's vision. He believed, she whispered. Even after everything. Lucas nodded. That's why I came back. Not for revenge. For him. Because I knew he wouldn't want me to walk away from someone trying to change. Outside, the media storm was brewing. Inside, something was finally breaking open, not between enemies, but between two people who had once stood on opposite sides of a war, and now were choosing to build something new in the rubble. The boardroom was packed. Alice sat at the head of the table, eyes locked on her father's. Victor Reddington stood tall, silver-haired and cold as stone, addressing the board like he never left. In light of new documents, he said, we are reopening the investigation into the Phoenix case, and we must question the leadership that allowed it to happen and the decisions being made now. Alice didn't flinch. She knew this wasn't about justice. It was about control, about humiliation. Still, she spoke. Yes, there was a cover-up. Yes, it was wrong. And no, I won't run from it. Gasps echoed around the room. Victor smirked. And what do you plan to do, Alice? Cry on camera? She stood. Number, I'm starting a full public transparency campaign. All records will be opened. Victims contacted. Settlements renegotiated. And I'm stepping down temporarily to ensure the process has integrity. Dead silence. One of the board members finally spoke. Who will lead in your absence? She took a breath. Lucas Callahan. Now the room erupted. Shouting, protests, laughter. Victor's voice boomed. A massage therapist? You'd hand the company to the brother of a liability claim? Alice remained calm. Lucas represents what we lost: honesty, humanity. I trust him. Meanwhile, Lucas sat in a coffee shop, reading the article. CEO suggests civilian take interim control during corporate cleanup. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Lucas Callahan. You think you're a hero? The voice growled. You're a scandal waiting to happen. Then they sent the photo. It was a doctored image, him and Alice, in a hotel room, clearly manipulated, but enough to spark rumors. The message followed. Turn it down, or this goes viral. Lucas stared at the screen. He had spent his life avoiding the spotlight, hiding behind guilt, shame, and silence. Now, Alice had dragged him into the eye of the storm, not maliciously, but with hope. And that terrified him more than any threat. That night, he showed up at her apartment. Alice opened the door, exhausted. Makeup gone. Soul bare. I saw it, she said quietly. The photo. He nodded. I've been threatened before, but never with something I care about. They sat in silence for a while. Then she said, I never should have put your name in that room. Lucas looked at her. I never should have walked out of it. She looked up, confused. He continued. You asked me once if I thought you were still the same woman. I don't. And I'm not the same man either. But if we keep letting them define us, we'll never become anything else. She reached for his hand. Then what do we do? Lucas took a deep breath. We fight. The next day, the story exploded. Ex-CEO appoints civilian to lead transparency campaign company in chaos? Love affair or corporate scam? Alice Reddington, linked romantically to whistleblower's brother. Victor Reddington held a press conference calling it a desperate distraction. But the public response surprised everyone. Thousands commented. About time someone told the truth. I believe her. That man turned down $5 million. I'd trust him with my company. And amid the noise, something remarkable happened. Stock prices held. Donations to the Transparency Fund increased. Former employees came forward not to sue, but to support. Lucas, once a ghost, had become a symbol. Not of perfection, but of integrity. That night, as they stood on the rooftop of her building, watching the city lights flicker below, Alice turned to him. I offered you $5 million for one night, she said softly. You gave me a future instead. Lucas smiled. Some things really are priceless. Victor Reddington wasn't used to losing. So when his legal team informed him that the board had voted to proceed with Alice's transparency campaign and that stockholders were supporting it, he didn't just get angry. He got dangerous. He called for an emergency meeting. Pull every file, he barked. We'll find something. Anything. That boy has a record, I guarantee it. But there was nothing to find. Lucas Callahan had no criminal history. No scandals. No dirt. Just one file, a closed lawsuit, sealed by the court, with a payout he never accepted. Victor's empire of intimidation was collapsing, and his daughter was the one lighting the fire. Alice sat alone in her old childhood home, staring at the fireplace where she used to build Lego castles. She remembered how Victor once told her, people don't love you. They love what you give them. Don't ever forget that. But now she knew that wasn't power. That was fear. When Lucas walked in, she didn't look up right away. I used to think I was just like him, she said. Cold, calculated, always 3 steps ahead. Lucas sat beside her. You were never him. You just didn't know that yet. 2 weeks later, Alice held a press conference. No filters, no scripts, just truth. She stood at a podium in front of a crowd of journalists, survivors, former employees, and shareholders. My name is Alice Reddington, she began, and I built a company I no longer recognize. I allowed silence to speak louder than justice. I failed people who trusted me. And I lost someone I never even got the chance to know, Tyler Callahan. The room was silent. But today, we begin again. She introduced the Callahan Initiative, a new foundation committed to workplace safety, corporate accountability, and direct survivor support. Funded by Reddington Skincare. Led by Lucas. The applause was slow at first, then grew, then became a standing ovation. Victor watched from his office, the live stream playing on mute. He poured himself a drink, leaned back, and for the first time in decades, looked tired. His assistant entered quietly. Sir, would you like to prepare a statement? He shook his head. Number, she finally won something that matters. Let her keep it. That evening, Alice and Lucas visited Tyler's grave for the first time together. She placed a small stone on the headstone, following Lucas's lead. I'm sorry I didn't know him, she whispered. You do now, Lucas said softly. They sat on the grass, hand in hand, as the wind moved gently through the trees. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Alice said, You know, I never asked what you would have done with that $5 million. He smiled faintly. Start a music school. Maybe a foundation. Help some people. Live quietly. She nudged his shoulder. Well, now you're doing all that. And living anything but quietly. He chuckled. Guess some things work out the loud way. Weeks passed. The Callahan Initiative opened its first facility in Phoenix, the city where everything began. Hundreds showed up for the ribbon cutting. Survivors, families, even a few former skeptics. Lucas gave the opening speech. We're not here because we're perfect, he said. We're here because we believe people can change and that some things should never have a price tag. Alice stood beside him, no longer in designer suits or guarded smiles. She had finally found something more valuable than power. Peace. 6 months later, the air was crisp in Colorado. Leaves had begun to fall. The mountains were quiet again, but something had changed. On the grounds of the new Callahan Institute for Ethical Innovation, a tree had been planted. Not just any tree, a cherry blossom. Alice stood beside it, her fingers brushing the thin trunk, eyes fixed on the soft pink petals just beginning to bloom. This wasn't part of the plan, she said softly. Lucas stood beside her, holding a small card that had come with the tree. No signature, just a note. Some things take time to grow. Let her bloom. VR. He looked at Alice. Your father? She nodded. He never says the words, but that's as close to love as he knows how to get. They stood there for a while, watching the wind move through the branches. Children laughed in the distance. Somewhere inside, a group of volunteers sorted books and supplies. The building was alive, and it had nothing to do with profit. Alice reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a coin. It was scratched, worn down on one side, the image barely visible. What's that? Lucas asked. My brother gave it to me when I started the company. He said, Keep this with you. It'll remind you that value isn't always visible. She handed it to Lucas. I think you understand that better than I ever did. He took the coin carefully, almost reverently. Then he smiled. Still not worth 5 million. She laughed a real laugh this time. Full, unapologetic. No, she said. Worth a hell of a lot more. That night, they sat on the rooftop of the Institute. The city lights far in the distance, the stars closer than ever. Lucas played soft notes on a guitar one Alice had bought him weeks earlier. He didn't sing, just let the melody speak. Alice closed her eyes. For years she had chased power, control, perfection. But now, she was finally still. Not because the world stopped moving, but because, for once, she wasn't afraid of where it was going. The screen fades to black. Then, one final message appears. Integrity is what you do when no one is watching. But love is what you give when you expect nothing in return.